They were supposed to be the first English settlement in the New World. But when a supply ship returned in 1590, the people of Roanoke had vanished. Houses dismantled, no sign of struggle, and a single word carved into a tree. CROATOAN. It sounds like fiction, but this chilling mystery is one of America's oldest unsolved cases. Where did over 100 men, women, and children disappear to without a trace? In 1587, over 100 English settlers landed on Roanoke Island, off what is now the coast of North Carolina. Led by John White, a former artist turned colonial governor, the group included families, not just soldiers or explorers. This was not a temporary camp. It was a colony meant to last. Homes were built, gardens were planted, and plans were drawn for permanent life in a foreign and often hostile land. But trouble came quickly. Food was scarce, relations with native tribes were tense, and disease spread easily in the humid environment. Within weeks, it became clear that the colony was struggling. Desperate to secure help and supplies, White made a fateful decision to return to England and gather resources, leaving his daughter, granddaughter, and the rest of the colonists behind. He promised to return swiftly. But fate had other plans. England was locked in war with Spain. Queen Elizabeth's navy needed every ship available to fend off the Spanish Armada. John White was stranded for 3 long years, unable to find passage back to his people. By the time he returned in 1590, the colony was abandoned, not destroyed, not burned, just gone. What he found was unsettling. The homes were carefully dismantled, not ransacked or looted. There were no graves, no bones, no signs of battle. The only clue: the word CROATOAN etched into a wooden post. It was the name of a nearby island and a local tribe, but no further info. Imagine standing on a windswept shore, with the crashing waves behind you and a dense, mysterious forest ahead. That's what the first settlers of Roanoke faced. To them, this land was wild, unforgiving, and filled with both danger and opportunity. Yet this wasn't just an adventure. This colony had the weight of an empire behind it. Queen Elizabeth I herself had given the order. England needed a foothold in the Americas. Roanoke was supposed to be the beginning of an English America. Sir Walter Raleigh, a favorite of the Queen, had been granted a royal charter to colonize North America. After failed attempts earlier in the decade, the 1587 expedition was meant to succeed where others had failed. This was no ordinary venture. Among the colonists were skilled craftsmen, farmers, and even White's pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare. She gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil, a symbol of hope and an emblem of future generations. But hope alone couldn't feed a colony. From the start, they were pressed by scarcity. Supplies were limited. Trade with local tribes was tense, especially after earlier English expeditions had mistreated native groups. Disease spread through the colony, made worse by the swampy conditions and humid summers. Meanwhile, English understanding of the land was minimal. They were settlers without maps, pioneers without guides. Yet White and his team believed help was just across the sea. When he departed for England, the colonists carved a sign, a cross, to be left behind if they were in danger. That symbol was never found. So whatever happened during those 3 years, it wasn't, according to their own plan, an act of distress. Still, many wonder if they ever got the chance to leave a signal at all. The landscape of Roanoke was already layered with unseen tensions. This wasn't empty land. It was 3 years. That's how long it took John White to get back to the colony he'd left behind. Every day of those 3 years, he must have wondered if his daughter Eleanor and granddaughter Virginia were safe. When his ship finally reached Roanoke Island in August 1590, the weight of anticipation was enormous. But instead of joyful reunions, he was met with absolute silence. No smoke from chimneys, no laughter of children, just the quiet rush of wind through empty trees. The settlement was deserted, eerily intact yet devoid of life. It wasn't destroyed, not in the way war or disaster leaves its mark. The fort was carefully dismantled, and there were no signs of violence or hurried escape. What kind of disappearance leaves everything neatly in place? But the strangest discovery came in the form of a single word. Carved into the palisade fence was CROATOAN. No cross, no distress signal, just that word. The name of a nearby island and a native tribe known to have had friendly relations with some colonists. On a separate tree, just the partial word crow was found, as if someone had been interrupted while carving it. White took it as a clue. He believed the settlers had moved to CROATOAN Island, now known as Hatteras. But harsh storms and the pressing demands of his ship's captain forced him to abandon the search. He never got to investigate the island. He never found out what happened to his family, and he never returned again. That single missed opportunity is one of the great what-ifs of American history. Could the answers have been just 50 miles away? If White had reached the CROATOAN people, might he have discovered the truth, that the colonists integrated, survived, or perhaps met a darker fate? No one knows, because the next time any Englishman searched the region in depth, decades had passed. And in those years, something strange happened. What if the real threat to the Roanoke colonists wasn't out there in the woods, but within their own camp? As we search for clues in this centuries-old mystery, one disturbing theory continues to surface, that the colony's downfall may have been the result of betrayal, desperation, or madness from within. Life in the wilderness was brutal. With few supplies, poor shelter, unfamiliar terrain, and the constant pressure of starvation, even the most civilized groups can fall apart. The English settlers were ill-prepared for long-term survival. Their knowledge of farming in the New World was limited. Their ability to hunt was poor, and their relations with native tribes had already been poisoned by earlier English expeditions, particularly those led by Ralph Lane, whose military-style leadership had led to brutal raids. Famine has a way of eroding trust. People begin to look at each other with suspicion. Small arguments grow into dangerous factions. Some researchers suggest the colony could have fractured into groups, each blaming the other for their misery. In such isolation, law and order would have been nearly impossible to enforce. Could violence or mutiny have driven some to flee, or even kill? Then there are hints, buried in obscure letters and reports, that suggest the colonists may have resorted to the unthinkable. Tales of cannibalism in other failed colonies, like Jamestown, just a few decades later, set a grim precedent. There's no hard evidence that this happened in Roanoke, but if starvation was severe and no help was coming, would desperate minds have gone to desperate extremes? Even John White's own writings contain signs of doubt. He noted the strange calm of the abandoned village, the way everything had been taken down, not destroyed. He also mentioned the lack of crosses or signals, but what he didn't say might be even more important. He never described a single word, carved into wood, left behind like a final whisper. CROATOAN. It's more than a clue. It's an obsession. For centuries, that one strange message has become the centerpiece of every theory, every legend, every attempt to explain what happened to the Roanoke settlers. But the closer you look, the more unsettling the possibilities become. The CROATOAN were a small tribe that inhabited present-day Hatteras Island, located to the south of Roanoke. They were known to have a relatively peaceful relationship with earlier English explorers, including Manteo, a CROATOAN man who traveled to England and returned with the colonists in 1587. Some believe that Manteo may have acted as a bridge between cultures, persuading his tribe to shelter the desperate colonists after White left. That theory sounds reasonable. If the settlers needed food, protection, and guidance, joining a native tribe would have been a practical move. But if that happened, why is there no record of it? Later English colonists who interacted with the CROATOAN never found any definitive proof. No graves, no English artifacts, no personal items, not even names passed down through families, and crucially, no confirmed sighting of Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. Some have argued that the English may have been absorbed into the tribe so fully that their customs vanished, their language lost over generations. Others suggest they may have been viewed as outsiders, protected for a time, but ultimately pushed out or erased. And then there's the eerie pattern of the word CROATOAN itself. It shows up in other strange disappearances across American history. When the writer Edgar Allan Poe was found delirious before his mysterious death, he reportedly uttered the word CROATOAN. The infamous pirate Blackbeard is said to have avoided the area near Roanoke, CROATOAN, aiming it was bewitched. In later years, the word would be scrawled in strange places connected to unexplained vanishings, from an abandoned ship in 1775 to a missing plane in the 1930s. Coincidence? Or is CROATOAN more than a location? A symbol, perhaps, of something people feared to name? But if the colonists truly went to Hatteras Island, there should have been some trace. Archaeologists have searched the area for centuries. Some small findings, English-style tools, weapons, and bits of pottery, have been uncovered, but none can be definitively linked to the Roanoke group. It remains a mystery that lives in shadows. What if the truth behind Roanoke's disappearance is far stranger than anything history books are willing to admit? What if this wasn't a case of relocation, starvation, or war, but something beyond our understanding? Over the centuries, Roanoke has become a magnet for outlandish, spine-chilling theories, some too strange to dismiss outright. One of the most persistent legends is that the island was cursed. Indigenous folklore from tribes near Roanoke speaks of forbidden places, lands where spirits roamed freely and nature itself turned hostile. Could the settlers have trespassed into one such realm, unknowingly sealing their fate? Some believe the land they chose for their colony held ancient spiritual significance, where the line between the physical world and something else was dangerously thin. Then come theories of interdimensional portals or time slips. The idea here is not new in folklore. Cultures around the world tell stories of people walking into forests and never returning, not because they died, but because they entered another realm. Could Roanoke have been one such location? If over 100 people vanished at once, leaving no trace, is it that outrageous to ask whether they left this world entirely? Others propose extraterrestrial involvement. Sightings of strange lights in the sky have been recorded in the region for centuries. Some UFO theorists point out the unnatural silence of the colony, the precision of its dismantling, and the total lack of biological remains as clues. They compare it to modern cattle mutilations, clean, surgical, and unexplained. It sounds wild, until you remember that every logical explanation so far has fallen short. Even writers like H.P. Lovecraft were inspired by Roanoke's unsettling silence. The idea of a colony swallowed by something ancient and nameless crept into his cosmic horror tales. One popular fictional theory, and that the settlers awakened something buried deep beneath the island, something that fed on people's minds, erasing them from memory, history, and time. And now, let's shift to you, the viewer. You've made it this far down a rabbit hole carved out by centuries of silence. But what do you think happened to the lost colony? Were they taken in by another tribe? Were they erased by war, disease, or something unnatural? Drop your theory in the comments and let's see whose ideas align and whose go deeper. Because this isn't just a story. It's an ongoing question. A riddle that's lasted more than 4 centuries. And perhaps your perspective is exactly what this mystery needs. For centuries, the ground beneath Roanoke Island remained stubbornly silent. Historians, treasure hunters, and archaeologists alike have scoured the landscape with tools both ancient and modern, chasing rumors of bones, ruins, or relics that might offer closure. But what if the Earth hasn't been completely silent, only that we've misunderstood what it's trying to say? The first serious archaeological digs began in the late 19th century. By then, the original Roanoke site had already eroded, reclaimed by trees and shoreline. Yet, scattered remnants were found. Pieces of armor, musket balls, European ceramics. At first glance, promising. But determining which artifacts belonged to the 1587 colonists and not to later English or native inhabitants, proved nearly impossible. In the early 2000s, a team of archaeologists launched the Lost Colony Project, using satellite imaging and soil scans to locate hidden features beneath the surface. One area, called Site X, near the Albemarle Sound, yielded surprising finds: fragments of English pottery, pieces of a rapier, and a slate writing tablet, all dated roughly to the late 16th century. It wasn't definitive, but it was enough to ignite hope that part of the colony may have moved inland. Then, in Hatteras Island, once known as CROATOAN, other teams uncovered European artifacts as well: a copper ring, iron tools, and English-styled items buried in native contexts. Did this suggest integration? A blending of cultures? Possibly. But again, no evidence linked it directly to the Roanoke settlers. It could just as easily belong to later English explorers. The mystery deepened when certain findings were left unpublicized. Some historians argue that small discoveries may have been intentionally downplayed to preserve local tourism or avoid controversy surrounding native burial grounds, and others believe important clues may have been lost or destroyed due to erosion, looting, or environmental damage. And what of the stone tablets? Between 1937 and 41, dozens of stones were reportedly found across North Carolina and Georgia, each carved with cryptic messages from Eleanor Dare, supposedly detailing the colony's fate. Initially considered a hoax, a few researchers now claim at least one stone, the first, may be authentic. If so, it tells a horrifying tale of illness, death, and only a few survivors. Yet even that remains unconfirmed. Why has a mystery this old continued to resist resolution, despite centuries of investigation? Is the truth scattered in fragments too small to piece together? Or is it being hidden in plain sight? Long before the English arrived on Roanoke Island, this land had memory. Its rivers, forests, and coastal winds carried stories, passed not on parchment, but through generations of oral tradition. And within those stories lie whispers about strangers who came from the sea, and then, mysteriously, vanished. European historians once dismissed native oral histories as folklore, not fact. But in recent decades, researchers have begun to realize that these ancient narratives may contain deeper truths than colonial records ever did. Several tribes in the Carolinas, especially the Lumbee, Tuscarora, and CROATOAN, have legends about people who came from the ocean, wore strange clothes, and spoke unknown words. Some say they were welcomed. Others say they brought trouble. Among the Lumbee tribe in Robeson County, there's a belief that their ancestors may be descendants of the lost colonists. Many Lumbee surnames, like Oxendine, Dial, and Lowry, mirror those from the Roanoke roster. Their oral traditions tell of ancestors who were different, with lighter skin and knowledge of European customs. But while these connections are intriguing, they're not conclusive. DNA testing has failed to produce definitive links between modern tribes and the original settlers. Still, the stories remain. One tale speaks of a group of pale-skinned people who sought refuge with a nearby tribe after their own group disbanded. Another recounts strange strangers arriving during a time of famine, offering tools and knowledge. These accounts, repeated across generations, hint at interactions now lost to official history. What's even more compelling is how these stories often include warnings of greed, betrayal, or unseen forces in the forest. Some tribes believed that the land around Roanoke had a spirit, one that did not take kindly to invaders. The forest, in their view, wasn't just alive. It was watchful, protective, and sometimes vengeful. Could the colonists have been accepted by one tribe, only to be attacked by another? Could intertribal politics, misunderstandings, or hidden alliances have led to their silent removal? Or was their presence tolerated for a time, until they violated a sacred boundary or broke an unspoken rule? Even stranger, Some native traditions hint at a group who simply disappeared into the trees. Not killed, not captured, just gone. Taken by something that doesn't leave footprints or bones. Roanoke was meant to be a beginning, the first spark of an English empire in the New World. Instead, it became a silence that echoes louder with each passing century. But why does this story, older than most modern nations, still grip our imagination? Why do we keep returning to that lonely island, listening for voices that never answer? The answer may lie in what Roanoke represents. Not just the disappearance of a group, but the disappearance of certainty. Most historical mysteries leave behind a trail. Bodies, letters, ruins, explanations. Roanoke left almost nothing. No smoke, no screams, no final act of defiance. Just emptiness. It's a reminder that not all stories end cleanly. That even in an age of satellites, DNA, and data, the human past can vanish without explanation. The colony's disappearance reflects a universal fear: to be forgotten. To work, build, love, and struggle, only for your name to fade like mist. That's what happened to Virginia Dare. Once a symbol of national hope, now only a question mark in a history book. For Native communities, Roanoke is also a symbol of survival, resilience, and the unacknowledged truths beneath colonial narratives. While English voices dominate the records, the land tells other stories, older and quieter. Stories of balance and loss, of people who knew the forests long before ships appeared on the horizon. For conspiracy theorists, Roanoke is an open wound, proof that secrets can be buried, that governments, researchers, or even nature itself might conspire to keep answers hidden. Every absence becomes suspicious. Every artifact becomes a potential cover-up. But for the rest of us, Roanoke endures because it's the perfect riddle. A story with just enough detail to feel real, but just enough missing to invite endless theories. It's the original American mystery, older than any cold case, with more suspects than any detective novel. And like all great mysteries, it asks more from us than simple curiosity. It asks us to imagine, to step into the shoes of people who left everything behind to chase a dream, and then vanished. It forces us to accept that sometimes history doesn't give us the closure we crave. Sometimes a wooden post with a single word is all that's left. No bodies, no diary, no signal fire, just wind through the trees, the creak of old wood, and a word, CROATOAN, etched like a whisper against time. Over 400 years later, the Roanoke colony remains the darkest kind of historical enigma. Not forgotten, not remembered, but forever unresolved. We've explored the logical explanations: starvation, tribal conflict, disease, even voluntary relocation. We've wandered through tales of curses, spirits, and otherworldly abductions. We've sifted through native oral traditions, archaeological fragments, and cryptic carvings. Yet still, nothing fully explains how more than 100 people could vanish, not with chaos, but with careful, deliberate silence. Maybe that's what makes Roanoke so chilling. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It didn't collapse in violence. It was simply erased. But perhaps the colony's greatest legacy is its ability to unsettle. It reminds us that there are limits to what history can capture, that sometimes the past slips beyond the reach of language, records, and memory. What happened on Roanoke Island may never be truly known, but its shadows linger. And maybe that's the point. The settlers became ghosts, not just in body, but in story. Echoes in the forest, names in old registries, faces we've never seen, lives we can only guess at. They were dreamers, survivors, and perhaps something else entirely. So we end where we began, with a missing colony, a single carved word, and a question that refuses to fade. Not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to remind us that the world still holds secrets, And some stories are strongest when told in whispers. If this journey into one of history's oldest mysteries gripped you, don't let it vanish like Roanoke. Hit that subscribe button for more stories that stretch the boundary between the known and the forgotten.